Hello, my Juicy co-creators. Lilu here. I'm in Stockholm today on this actually very last day in Stockholm. We're going to talk about Zen with you, Sante. Hello, thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for letting me come and have this last moment interview.
Yeah, this last minute interview, and this is a significant one because we're going to talk about Zen. Zazen. What is Zazen?
Zazen means seated meditation. Sa means sitting. Zen means meditation.
So Zen means meditation in
Japanese, but it's it comes from Chinese shan, which also means meditation, which is the Chinese attempt to say jhana, which is Indian Sanskrit for meditation. So it's all mean meditation. Yeah.
So you're part of this, one of the, I guess, the founding members, if I could say, or teachers of this Zen garden, and there's lots of location, mainly from my understanding in around Scandinavia, but also in Germany, Glasgow. And so there's those retreat centers, or those retreats called shishin.
Sesshin. Yes.
Oh, my Japanese is getting good. Soon I will be in Japan.
Se and then shin. Sesshin.
Sesshin. And I'm myself very attracted to the Japanese culture, I must say, their respect for life and the way they live. What brought you to this lifestyle? Because it's more than just a practice, isn't it?
No, it's a lifestyle. I mean, to me, it's a life.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 30 years, more or less full time, more or less. So it's really been my life. I can hardly remember why I started, but it's. I was not interested in Japanese culture at all. That was not the reason why I started this. I think it was more existential questioning, and by chance or faith or karma or whatever, I just happened to pick up a book when I was like 16 from a library that taught me how to actually sit and do some meditation, and I tried, and it helped me somewhat, and then I think it was 1982. There was this Zen master visiting Sweden, an American named Philip Kapleau, and it was kind of a big deal. And I was not very sure if I would even go, but I finally went, and I was very impressed by him, and so I very soon started to sort of give up almost. Not give up, but I was an artist to be. I was, had a studio. I was doing a lot of painting, and had a tiny bit of success with that. Thought of that as my life. I was always been very interested in art, drawing and painting. But then this kind of took over, and soon I moved to Rochester, New York, where this master had a temple center, and stayed there for a few years, and then the years just rolled by. Mm-hmm. And then 1991, I was ordained as a Zen Buddhist priest, and in 1998, I was asked to teach by my then teacher. My first teacher, Kapleau Roshi, had retired, and his successor his name is Bodin, Khalid, also American. He asked me if I wanted to teach in Sweden, which I started doing that.
So are you a Lama?
We don't call it Lama. We call it, the Japanese term is Sensei, which means literally one who walks ahead. So it's sort of like a guide, or but it does mean teacher. Mm-hmm. So it's a teacher, and a master is someone who, I'm a teacher. I'm a Zen teacher. That's what I call myself. But to be, a master is someone who has disciples. So only a disciple would call me a master. So, I mean, I think if you say a Zen master, which is very common, you hear English language, it sounds a little bit weird. It sounds like, you know, like a sports champion. Because we use the word master in this way in the English language, and in the Swedish it's not. Yeah.
But it's seen also, it could be seen in a negative way too for some people. And I must say I have recently done a video about this as to the different masters, you know, guru, some are the incarnated one, and it can be, and some people a little bit abuse of that too, and it can be scary, and it can be manipulative too. So what's your view on what's a master, and what is for you something that you look for in your master, for example?
Yeah, well, I think when I met Kapleau Roshi, he was to me my master. I don't think he ever thought I'm a master, because he was very unassuming and was very extremely proud when someone mistook him for the janitor at the center where he was teaching, because he wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. But for me, a master is someone that you connect with so deeply that you feel that I can trust this person. A teacher is more like someone who instructs you, like you know, a professor at the university might teach you things, but I don't think you would consider that relationship so close. But it could become, and if it becomes really close, like intimate almost, like something that you trust each other and you help each other and you.
And it is natural too.
Then I think it becomes natural that you see that person as your master. But people who go around and say, I'm the master, or I'm a guru, or I'm quite suspicious of. You know, in Buddhism, usually, not in Tibetan Buddhism has this concept of gurus and lamas. Well, a lama is actually just a teacher, but gurus, you know, where you have a spiritual guru. It's not that I'm not against it at all, but I think generally in Buddhism you talk about kalyana mitra, which means spiritual friend. So it's more like you develop a kind of a relationship with someone, and one is guiding the other because one has walked ahead. Someone has more experience, and then you can help each other. But I see it when I have students. I see that the students are helping me as much as I am helping them, because it is a relationship. It's then two people. There's always a back and forth of experience. So yes, I am.
And we're all humans.
I mean, basically we all, this blood and this, it's the same. It's the same. So no, it's no difference between. Essentially, there's no difference between people at all. And actually, the Buddha was also a human being. Yeah. He lived, he breathed, and died. And I think that there is a risk when you go into, which we always worry about, is that when you go into spiritual practice, and it's not just in the West, it happens very much in the East also, that there is a worship. Yeah. You put something on a pedestal. Like very high up.
Especially in the East, huh?
I think especially in the East. Yeah. And it's so strongly connected with senses of filial duty, the idea of like how you trust your parents and the state.
The and respect.
Respect, very, very strong, overwhelming respect. You never speak badly about your elders, you never question, you never look... and this is, I think this is a curse of, well, not just Zen or Buddhism even, it's a curse of all spiritual practice and all religion. It's quite...
and then the people, those people, it's easy to get trapped, and all of us in all our lives can easily get trapped around this identification or those labels, and then coming clean and being authentic and saying what's really going on, because we all make mistakes, is an essential one. Especially right now, I feel as there's a lot of cleanup that are being done in all areas. In the economy, in the banking system, and the government, and but also in spirituality. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, well, my view on spirituality, I think it's a very difficult word.
Yeah.
And I think there is two, what I see now is that there are two problems in facing people practicing in the West. And I think it's, well, what I know about is mostly Buddhism, of course. But, you know, one is that you cling to tradition. And because tradition has its, I mean, obvious values. In my mind, there are values in tradition. There is values in lineage, in let's call it wisdom and knowledge passed down from generation to generation. There is some value to that. But what happens, I think, very often is that people, you know, it's like when you're a Buddhist, you are walking in the footsteps of the Buddha. That's the idea. But people get obsessed by the footsteps and, you know, walking exactly and forgetting that why, if you are inspired by the example of the Buddha, why did he walk those steps at all? He did it because he was on a spiritual quest. And you can't just follow him. Because if you just follow in the footsteps, then it's not a spiritual quest. Yeah. You're just a conformist. You're just trying to follow the rules and regulations and structures, and then power and all kinds of issues comes in. And I think this is a big problem in Buddhism, not the least in the East, and not the least in Japan. I've seen many examples of that. So then people have sort of, I guess, rebelled a little bit against this, especially in the West, trying to find their own spiritual empowerment or empowering themselves. And
finding the Buddha in us.
Yes, of course, which is exactly what the Buddha was talking about.
What was his profound message? That
well, you know, he said, "Be a light unto yourself."
Be
a light unto yourself. Yeah. Do not follow others. He even said, you know, do not listen to or believe in things just because teachers, masters, prophets, elders, parents says it is so, but examine in your own heart whether it is true or not. And then you just hear this big crowd of Buddhists saying, yes. It's like in this this Monty Python movie, Life of Brian, where this guru is in front of a big crowd saying, don't follow me. And everybody's chanting in unison, yes, don't follow me. Because they don't get it. Yeah. But in Zen, there's always been this strong emphasis on, you know, you have to eat the food yourself to know how it tastes. You can't just read menus. It doesn't satisfy hunger. You have to drink the water yourself to ascertain whether it's cold or warm. So it is a personal spiritual quest. And in my feeling, experience, of course I never met the Buddha, literally, but it seems from his teaching that he was really, in a sense, he was an individualist, maybe the first one, because religion in that time was very much concerned with, you know, the caste system, you know, and you are born into, like most people these days, they're born into being Christians or Muslims or Jews or Buddhists. It's not really a personal questioning, and I think this suits the power of religion. I mean, the institution of religion, because then you have a group of people, the majority, who never questions anything.
Well, we see it in Christianity and Judaism, and I'm sure in Buddhism as well.
Oh, everywhere.
Yeah. All religions are kind of crumbling.
And I think this is one of the reasons, because people now want to question and find like their own way. And I think this is very good, but there is a but. There's a but, and the but is that what I see sometimes is sort of the opposite kind of risk, because what happens with this, the first thing I mentioned now about how religion just makes you conform and not think for yourself, not question for yourself, not search inside yourself. You say the priest can take care of that. That's good, you know. I'm just a believer, which is kind of ridiculous. But it also fosters kind of laziness because it's a very lazy way of living. You know, I don't have to care. But I think this very personalized or individualized spirituality that we see growing everywhere also fosters a kind of a laziness sometimes, because it maybe it's because of media or maybe it is because of
our own laziness too. We have this, I think, victim mode of being, and that's how we were born into, and that's okay. But there's a lot of work to do about that, to stand up 100 responsible for our life and not put it in the hands of a text or a person, because we are the one that are making those choices, and we need to wake up. I think this is the awakening, is part of waking up to this reality and to what really life is about, and how powerful we are, and yet how powerful the universe is.
Seriously, and powerful the universe is. But what happens sometimes is I think that spirituality in this modern sense becomes, because it's so individualized, it becomes a commodity. You know, it's become something you can buy and sell, and that people, because it is turned into something that's packaged very for the individual to consume, it also has to become, not always, but sometimes, more superficial, because there is commercialization, there is a market force, you know, that says, well, let's say I look at the internet and I'm interested in spiritual growth. Maybe I want enlightenment, let's say, and I look.
I'm going to buy a diploma for enlightenment.
And you see, okay, this guy, he offers enlightenment in 3 days.
Yeah.
This tradition, these guys, they say you have to work for the rest of your life and maybe you won't even get it. So which one should I buy? Yeah. So I think this is...
we want it now.
We want it now, and we want it for ourselves, and it's supposed to help us, which is fine, but that's not really... You know, when you open up to awakening or enlightenment, it's not about yourself. It's about that which is not yourself, which is bigger than yourself. Yourself is like a snowflake compared to this.
But it starts from there.
It has to start from there. But I think that sometimes what happens is that people, because of this privatization of religion or spirituality, never go beyond actual, so it becomes a kind of a consumption. I do a little bit of power yoga, I do a little bit of qigong, I do a little bit of shamanic things, and absolutely nothing wrong with that, because there is a smorgasbord of options and possibilities. But I still, now only coming from my own example, I still believe somehow that if you want to go deep, you do. It is helpful if you can focus your mind enough to go into something, to sort of dig where you are instead of just running around and sort of sampling things. So this is, I think, the other kind of laziness that appears, that you just lazily think, yes, I'm spiritual, I do, you know, I've done a little bit of this. I once even went to a retreat and it was really nice. So this is danger, I think.
And at the same time, it's dangerous to make too quickly a decision as well, because it's good to sample and taste and see, so that then when something really resonates, you know for sure from experience. So I think there's a different perspective, and the main thing it comes down to is listen to your heart. Maybe earlier on in your life you will feel that calling and you want to deepen your practice with a particular technique and train of thoughts, and maybe at different life there is different. I think there's so many possibilities, like there is an infinite number of possibilities.
And you can, I agree, and I was once in a seminar with the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. This is many years ago, and someone asked about this, and he said that he thought it was very good with this smorgasbord of spiritual choices, because before he said before you choose your guru, you should spy on him for at least 7 years, which I think is quite good. I mean, I don't think people need to choose a guru, actually. I think, people who become my students, personal students, I feel that, yes, as long as they want to work with me, I'll work with them. But
they're free.
they're free. They can change their mind. It's like, I sometimes say, yes, it's like a marriage, but you can divorce at any time you want, and I will not feel bad about it. I will have no hard feelings, because I think it is important that people feel that they can move on, and I think there's actually very few people who will stay, who will have this kind of one-track mind that I have, or have had, who can stay within a tradition for 30, 40 years or whatever. But what happens if you do that, if you stay with one path, then you can find that, yes, but I am free inside of this. I can explore. I can go to, I can be a Zen Buddhist and still do tarot, or something else. I can learn, and I can grow, and I can develop by taking in many different things.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean betraying or none of that. No. Life is so open and so big and so vast.
Betrayal comes from, when you betray something, well, if it's a cult, or, then betraying is a big deal. As soon as you betray something, or you say, I want to leave, they go crazy, and they kick you out, or they start to follow you, or try to get your money, or your life, or whatever. But if it's not a cult, if it's just some benign path you're walking, then I think betraying it is very difficult. I mean, because betrayal then just means you're betraying yourself, your innermost feeling, or what you really want to do. But still, what happens when people work in Zen, when they work with a teacher or a master, they will come up on, difficulties within themselves and within the relationship. And the teacher is not just nice. That's, I think, it's like...
Sometimes there's tough love, or being strong for a teacher so that person can see.
Yeah, and sometimes that means that that you will be hurt, or you will, like someone said to me when I talked with someone, this is many years before I became a teacher, but there was a guy who had been practicing Zen Buddhism for many years, and he said about choosing your master or your teacher, he said that, well, I tended, when I had a choice between two people I both respected and thought could really help me, I chose the one that irritated me the most, because I thought that would be probably more helpful for me, because it was something with that person that sort of, irritated me. And I think this can be very helpful. And my first teacher, Kapleau Roshi, he said it's like it's like putting a piece of sand inside an oyster, and the oyster are irritated by this piece of sand, so it becomes a pearl, it covers. And so that a certain amount of pain or struggle or difficulty is part of a spiritual path.
And yet it can go very far. I've seen some Chinese master really scream at others and put them in position like, you bow now and you do this. And is this good?
No, that's, well,
boundaries. Huh?
I think maybe in Chinese or Japanese culture, which is very feudal, at least Japanese culture, which I know better, still have this feudal kind of lord vassal. I think for those who are brought up in that system, that tradition, maybe it works. Maybe it's just, maybe they don't take it so seriously. I don't know. But for Westerners, it definitely doesn't work. And I also see an example of how, maybe not that strong, but I've seen examples of how the system becomes like, it becomes like English boarding schools. It's penalistic. Yeah. The elders punish the youngers all the time. And not always the teacher. The teacher might be very friendly and benign, but he is sort of removed from all this stuff. So it is like the middle management who always puts down in I think a really panellistic atmosphere that can be terrible. So no, I'm very much. I'm really trying not to do that.
No. But it's a very interesting conversation, I think, to have, especially in this time, and I really appreciate your thoughts and your openness in this conversation, so we can talk about it, because this is very much aligned with the video I just did about all this, and just so that people have warnings too, because when we're new at something, sometimes we're embarked into seminars when they force people to sign up or put peer pressure or super high expensive way outside the budgets, and there's credit cards that start flying. I mean, there's a lot of practices that I really feel are not appropriate anymore, and a lot of people need to say no to that right now, otherwise it will continue, and unfortunately it tarnishes the beauty of spirituality.
I mean, that happens also that happens in I think traditional religious context, but it also happens outside of it. Unfortunately, quite a lot. I think there are these sort of, I won't say self-made gurus, but people who, not least Americans, who does become gurified by some experience, for example, or something, or they met some Indian guru, or they have this power, and they are empowered to teach for some reason, even either self-proclaimed or by someone else, but they just go astray, and I think you have to be careful. My Kapleau Roshi used to say, what you should be aware or worried about, what you should look for as warning signs for in teachers or masters or gurus, is an over concern with money, your money, and an over concern with fame and name, so that you always sort of go to the biggest, you make the biggest displays of yourself. There should be big crowds, and you should ideally should come down in a helicopter, throwing flowers, and then land, and you smile, and stay away from your students as much as possible, because as long as you keep distance, it's very easy to be gurified, because you don't see anything bad in a person you don't know. And then the third warning sign is sex. If the teacher just want to get into your pants all the time, that's probably a big problem.
Well, I was interviewing somebody yesterday that followed for quite some time Mahachi. But he was a celibate monk, but in fact he was not, because he had many women, and she's one of the women that came out. And so we had a bit of this conversation about preaching something, when on the other end, unfortunately they're not walking the talk, and they're having plenty of women.
It's an old problem in Buddhism also, I think. I mean, and of course Catholic Church, we all heard about all these problems that comes with celibacy, maybe, but I also think just with power. So these are things I think you should be careful about when looking into teachings, and I think also when people talk about gurus and masters and how wonderful they are, I usually think that the best, if you want to have a guru, the best thing is if the guru has been dead for at least a couple of 100 years, because then
things come out when they're dead.
Yeah, because then they can't do anything more wrong to you. You can just have them as an icon, like Jesus Christ, or someone that you just are deeply inspired by, and might be like something that you take into your own. It's really you, and this is, I think, what we always, in my tradition, we emphasize is that the real master is yourself. It's in your own heart. You are the Buddha, and everything else is projection. You project onto this world you see around you things, and then you might believe that, but if I go to India or if I go there, then I can meet this person that is enlightened.
Then I will be.
Yes, then I will be. I will, and then you become which I think happens very often in people in sects and cults and guru worship, where it goes too far, is that they become like, the guru is like the sun that shines, and the people are like satellites, like the moon or planets, and they circle around, and as long as they are close, they are also enlightened. The light shines on them, and they feel empowered or blessed or whatever. But when they leave, they suddenly become into the darkness, because they haven't realized that you have to be your own light. You have to be, you have to find the sun inside yourself, not trust or just stay in the reflection of someone else. But there is a very deep wish for this in, I think maybe in the West, not the least, by people who go into spirituality. They are looking for someone that can shine their light upon them, and they don't. So again, it becomes laziness.
Yeah, and it's always outside, and it's this search outside of us when all is here. Yeah, and it's a process. Let's talk about your book that you published, that was published a few years ago.
Yes, this was kind of a love child of mine. It's called The Net of Indra, and I wrote it. It took me like a couple of years, but I actually did the actual writing during 5 weeks in solitude in Portugal. I stayed there in the winter just to write it down, but I had done. And it deals with rebirth, the concept of rebirth in Buddhism, and with the idea that I was kind of inspired by a Japanese Zen master named Hakuin, who he lived in the 17th century, and there was a man who came to him and said, "What happens when we die?" And Hakuin said, "I don't know." And this man said, "But you're a Zen master, for Christ's sake." No, I didn't say that. You're a Zen master. Yeah. You should know. And Hakuin said, "Well, a Zen master I might be, but I'm not a dead one." So I decided I wanted to write, because there are books about reincarnation and rebirth that are really just based on faith. That either there is a Lama or someone who writes, and it's just saying this is how it is. This is what happens in the bardo. This is what happens between lives. This is da-da-da-da. Or there are people who are channeling information. And it's not that I'm saying that's wrong or bad, but it becomes like word of authority. Like, oh, I have to believe this because this is channeled by someone, or this is a Lama who's saying this. And I thought, well, I don't actually know. So I want to write from a more modern perspective to people who might think, well, maybe there is something to this whole concept of rebirth. Maybe when I die, I will become someone else, but I don't know. And is it even possible to think that or believe that with what we know about biology, Darwinism, the brain? Most scientists who study the brain thinks that when we die, we just poof. The brain is like the liver. Or the heart.
Well, there's some brilliant scientists like Dr. Mario Beauregard that I interviewed that thank God explain that the brain and the consciousness are two separate things.
Yeah. So I was interested in that, and I tried to. Well, I interviewed a couple of, before I started working on the book, I interviewed a couple of brain scientists from Karolinska, this institute here in Stockholm, and got their sort of quite mainstream view. They would not agree with Beauregard. But then I also interviewed other people. There's Adrian Parker is a parapsychologist, works in Göteborg University. And I talked with sort of a little bit more alternative points of view, and I tried to understand this from different sort of levels, how you can look at science, because I realized that science is not one voice when it comes to these matters. There are discontent, there are people like Beauregard, but there are actually many others who has alternative views. And
they're not into the materialism science.
They're not materialists, basically. They are at least open to the possibility that there is something something else going on, and that this materialist track that science is in might be a mistake, might be a dead end.
Can evolve.
But what I felt is like, you know, if you have a path that a majority of scientists, I think, in the world actually, for example, neuroscientists, a clear majority believes that the brain is the producer of consciousness. End of period. So when the brain dies, consciousness disappears. And they just don't, it's not just that they believe it, they think that anything else is nonsense. Nonsensical, impossible, just ridiculous. How could you be so stupid to believe something else? And I was very curious, how can it be that you can have such a, how can you be so convinced? And I found, I think, many reasons, but one reason, I think, you know, I call it, but I didn't make up that term, I call it scientism, which is kind of the religion of materialistic sciences, where you sort of, you have turned science into a belief system rather than a method, you know, of exploration. And that has become very strong in our culture. And if you are completely sort of inside that paradigm or thinking, then alternative views becomes literally nonsense to you. It's not just that that's probably not true, but it becomes impossible. And I think, for example, when, as a historical example from earlier era, when, you know, when Galilei made his telescope in the 16th century or whatever, and he looked out on the stars or the sky and he saw something different, he realized that, okay, so the Earth is not flat. It actually is a ball that circles around the sun together with other balls. When he said that to people in his time, it was not just that they thought it was wrong, they thought it was nonsense. They thought it was, they were so convinced because everyone knew that the world is flat. I mean, it wasn't just a belief, it was a knowledge, and it was like self-evident. You just look around, you see everything is flat, you know, there's a little bit of mountains, and above there's this dome sky, and everyone knew that this must be the truth. So if you say something else, something as ridiculous as we actually live on a globe that circle in nothingness, they think that's nonsense. That's schizophrenic talk. And I think something similar is going on in today, that some things are termed nonsense because it's unintelligible to people who are completely stuck in a materialistic worldview. They can't see outside it. It's almost impossible. The
same way that religion could be too much stuck in dogmas and not see what's outside, yeah.
Exactly.
And then fight and have wars.
Yes. And I know in the United States there is a kind of a war between science and religion going on different levels, some very stupid, superficial levels, some, I think, quite intelligent. But there is a conflict going on, and I think it's a stupid conflict in the sense that science is a very powerful tool that so I met, through the course of writing this book, I came into contact with people that are scientists, like Dean Radin is an American scientist who written many books. Entangled Minds is one of them, and he's a parapsychologist. And I met other people like that who I think has more a broader view and has been brave enough to encounter nonsense. Because I think, you know, this is the value of nonsense. That if your worldview is completely stuck, so you can't see outside of it, then the only way to go outside of it is through nonsensical things, like stupid things, like wild thoughts.
Out of the box, yeah.
Yes, and it's very hard to get out of the box if you're inside the box, except if you are prepared to go almost to these crazy levels of thoughts. So I sometimes say that, like in the Alice in Wonderland, that you should believe at least a few impossible things before breakfast. You know, you should, because sometimes people ask me, what do you believe in? And I say, I believe in anything. I'm prepared to believe in anything, at least for a little moment, to sort of open the possibility that, well, maybe it is so. And
so rebirthing, you were able to, reincarnation, you were able to see it?
I thought through this book, I could find myself saying that, yes, this is, because I do have some memories that came up in meditation from what I think is possibly previous lifetimes, and I think it makes sense. So even though it is nonsensical from certain points of view, from other points of view, it's not nonsensical at all. So if you get outside of the box, you can find that it's really something that might be literally true. And this is what I think I believe. I mean, not think I believe, I do believe it, but in the book I'm not trying to push for it. I'm just saying, you can open your mind and be open to the possibility that this is happening. And if it is so, then what would that mean? Yeah. What would it mean to you? What would it mean in your life, when you make choices? And
it takes it to another level.
Another level. But still, I'm open for, I can, if someone says, I've seen a UFO, I will not say, that can't be so. I say, oh, that's interesting. Can you show me? Or can you describe it? Or if someone talks about ghosts, or, I'm open to almost anything. My grandmother on my father's side was a shaman. She was half Lappish, and she worked as a shaman her whole life. I mean, like a witch, I guess you could call it. So I think through her and through that, I feel like there is endless possibilities. And what we usually see of the world, except like in depth of meditation, through maybe awakening experiences or trance states, or sometimes even in dreams and things like that, what we see is just a tiny fraction. We see like the tip of the iceberg, and we make the wrong assumption that this is it. This is the life. And it's
Thank you. Thank you so much for this captivating moment, Sante. I loved it. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was delightful and a great way to end this magnificent trip for me throughout Scandinavia. And I wish you lots of beautiful, joyful, full-hearted moments in your life. Thank you.
You too.
Much love, my delicious co-creators from Stockholm. Bye-bye.
A teacher is more like someone who instructs you, like a professor at the university might teach you things, but I don't think you would consider that that relationship so close. But it could become, and if it becomes really close, like intimate almost, like something that you trust each other and you help each other and you.
And it is natural too.
Then I think it becomes natural that you see that person as your master. But people who go around and say, I'm the master, or I'm a guru, or I'm quite suspicious of. In Buddhism, usually, not in Tibetan Buddhism has this concept of gurus and lamas. Well, a lama is actually just a teacher, but gurus, where you have a spiritual guru. It's not that I'm not against it at all, but I think generally in Buddhism you talk about kalyana mitra, which means spiritual friend. So it's more like you develop a kind of a relationship with someone, and one is guiding the other because one has walked ahead. Someone has more experience, and then you can help each other. But I see it when I have students. I see that the students are helping me as much as I am helping them, because it is a relationship. It's then it's two people. There's always a back and forth of experience. Yes.
Oh, my Japanese is getting good. Soon I will be in Japan.
Se and then shin. Se shin.
Seshin. And I'm myself very attracted to the Japanese culture. I must say their respect for life and the way they live. What brought you to this lifestyle? Because it's more than just a practice, isn't it?
No, it's a lifestyle. I mean, to me, it's a life. Yeah. I've been doing this for 30 years, more or less full time, more or less. So it's really been my life. I can hardly remember why I started, but it's. I was not interested in Japanese culture at all. That was not the reason why I started this. I think it was more existential questioning, and by chance or faith or karma or whatever, I just happened to pick up a book when I was like 16 from a library that taught me how to actually sit and do some meditation, and I tried, and it helped me somewhat, and then I think it was 1982. There was this Zen master visiting Sweden, an American named Philip Kapleau, and it was kind of a big deal. And I was not very sure if I would even go, but I finally went, and I was very impressed by him. I'm a Zen teacher, that's what I call myself. But to be, a master is someone who has disciples, so only a disciple would call me a master. So, I mean, I think if you say a Zen master, which is very common, you hear in English language, it sounds a little bit weird. It sounds like, like a sports champion. Because we use the word master in this way in the English language, and in the Swedish it's not. Yeah.
But it's seen also, it could be seen in a negative way too for some people. And I must say I have recently done a video about this as to the different masters, guru. Some are the incarnated one, and it can be, and some people a little bit abuse of that too, and it can be scary, and it can be manipulative too. So what's your view on what's a master, and what is for you something that you look for in your master, for example?
Yeah, well, I think when I met Kapleau Roshi, he was to me my master. I don't think he ever thought I'm a master, because he was very unassuming and was extremely proud when someone mistook him for the janitor at the center where he was teaching, because he wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. But for me, a master is someone that you connect with so deeply that you feel that I can trust this person. And so I very soon started to sort of give up almost not give up, but I was an artist to be. I was, had a studio. I was doing a lot of painting and had a tiny bit of success with that. Thought of that as my life. I was always been very interested in art, drawing and painting. But then this kind of took over, and soon I moved to Rochester, New York, where this master had a temple center, and stayed there for a few years, and then just the years just rolled by. Mm-hmm. And then 1991, I was ordained as a Zen Buddhist priest, and in 1998, I was asked to teach by my then teacher. My first teacher, Kapleau Roshi, had retired, and his successor his name is Bodin, Khalid, also American. He asked me if I wanted to teach in Sweden, which I started doing now.
So are you a Lama?
We don't call it Lama. We call it, the Japanese term is Sensei, which means literally one who walks ahead. So it's sort of a, like a guide, or but it does mean teacher. Mm-hmm. So it's a teacher, and a master is someone who, you have.
Hello, my Juicy Co-creators. Lilu here. I'm in Stockholm today on this actually very last day in Stockholm. We're going to talk about Zen with you, Sante. Hello, thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for letting me come and have this last moment interview. Yeah,
this last minute interview, and this is a significant one because we're going to talk about Zen. Zazen. What is Zazen?
Zazen means seated meditation. Sa means sitting. Zen means meditation.
So Zen means meditation in
Japanese, but it's it comes from Chinese shan, which also means meditation, which is the Chinese attempt to say jhana, which is Indian Sanskrit for meditation. So it's all mean meditation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're part of this, one of the, I guess, the founding members, if I could say, or teachers of this Zen garden, and there's lots of location, mainly from my understanding in around Scandinavia, but also in Germany, Glasgow. And so there's those retreat centers, or those retreats called Shishin.
Shin.